Right now, more than 15 billion miles from where you are sitting, a team of engineers is attempting something on a 50-year-old spacecraft that has never been tried before. Most people assume Voyager 1 will keep going until, one day, something simply breaks. That assumption is wrong. Voyager 1 is not going to fail. She is being switched off, piece by piece, in an order decided years in advance, by people who know exactly what they are giving up every single time they cross a name off the list. Yes, there is a list. It was written years ago. And this past summer, for the first time in 5 decades, that same team tried something to slow it down. This is not a story about a machine dying. It is a story about a machine that keeps answering, decade after decade, while the people who love her fight to buy her more time. I am your name, and this is your channel. Stay with me, because what they just attempted changes everything. Let's go back to February 27th, 2026. On that day, the Voyager team executed something called a roll maneuver, a small adjustment that turns the spacecraft slightly so its instruments and antenna line up the way they need to. It is about as routine as anything gets in deep space operations. Engineers at JPL have performed this exact kind of maneuver hundreds of times since the 1970s. Nobody expected this one to be any different. But the power dropped. Not by a little. By more than anyone on the team had modeled for a maneuver this ordinary. For a few tense hours, the spacecraft was sitting close to a threshold nobody wanted to think about. The point where an automatic undervoltage protection system would trigger. That system exists for one reason. It is a survival mode, designed to shut down non-essential systems the instant power falls too low to keep the spacecraft safe. If it had triggered, there was no guarantee of what would come back online afterward or when. Think about that. A machine that survived Jupiter, survived Saturn, survived interstellar space itself, came closer to trouble on an afternoon in February 2026 during a maneuver so common it barely gets a mention in mission logs. 7 weeks later, the team made a decision they had been preparing for. They switched off an instrument that had been running, almost without pause, since 1977. That single, ordinary maneuver had just moved the timeline forward. And to understand why, you need to understand exactly what has been quietly draining this spacecraft for the last 49 years. Right now, in 2026, Voyager 1 sits more than 15.7 billion miles from Earth. That is roughly 168 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun. A radio signal, traveling at the fastest speed anything in this universe can travel, takes about 23.5 hours just to reach her. Send a question on a Monday morning and you will not hear an answer until Wednesday. 2 full days for a single exchange. She is moving away from us at roughly 38,000 miles per hour, gaining another 3.6 astronomical units of distance every single year, and she has never once slowed down. In November of this year, she will cross a threshold no human-made object has ever reached before, a full light day from home. We will come back to that. But here is the part that actually explains everything happening to her right now. Voyager 1 is powered by 3 radioisotope thermoelectric generators, devices that convert the heat released by decaying plutonium-238 into electricity. Plutonium doesn't wear out the way a machine does. It simply decays, steadily, predictably, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop it. Every year, without exception, since the day she launched in 1977, Voyager 1 has lost about 4 watts of power. Today, she is running on less than half of what she started with. This creates a brutal balancing act, one the team has managed for decades with remarkable discipline. Cut power to the wrong system and precious energy is saved. Cut too much, and the fuel lines that keep her attitude control working can freeze solid, ending everything. Every single decision the team makes is a negotiation between the cold and the dark, and somehow, for 49 years, they have kept her standing right in the narrow space between both. Here is the part almost nobody knows. The order in which Voyager 1's instruments go dark was not decided this year or last year. It was written down years ago, a literal ranked list, drawn up by engineers who sat down and made an almost impossible calculation. Which pieces of this spacecraft matter most, and in what order can we afford to lose the rest? At launch, Voyager 1 carried 10 scientific instrument packages. 7 of them have already been switched off. Follow the list with me. In February of 2025, the cosmic ray subsystem went dark. Then, on April 17, 2026, the low-energy charged particle instrument was switched off, after nearly 49 years of running almost without interruption since the day she left Earth. But here is the detail that stops people cold. Attached to that instrument is a small motor, one whose only job is to physically rotate the sensor. When the instrument was shut down, that motor was left running, drawing just half a watt. Not because it does any science anymore. It was left on purely so it would not seize up, on the chance, however small, that it could one day be switched back on. A light left on for someone who probably is not coming home. Except in this story, there is still a chance she might. Suzanne Dodd, the mission's project manager at JPL, put it plainly in 2025. Without these shutdowns, the mission had only a few months left before the team would have had to declare it over. Instead, by making these hard, deliberate cuts, one line at a time, they bought her years. The team's stated goal is not survival for its own sake. It is endurance with purpose, keeping at least one working science instrument alive into the 2030s. Every choice on that list exists to protect that single goal. But before any of these carefully planned shutdowns, there was a moment when the list nearly did not matter at all, when Voyager 1 came far closer to going silent for good than most people ever realized. On November 14th, 2023, Voyager 1 kept doing exactly what she had done for 46 straight years. She transmitted a signal back to Earth, right on schedule. But this time, the signal made no sense. Instead of readable data, it carried a repeating pattern of ones and zeros over and over, saying nothing at all. She was still listening. She still received every command sent to her. She still executed them correctly. She simply could not speak anymore. For a team that had been reading this spacecraft's signals since 1977, this was unlike anything they had faced. 5 months went by. 5 months of a team that knew this machine better than almost anyone on Earth knew anything, working the problem patiently, methodically, one exchange at a time, each one costing nearly 2 full days round trip. On March 3rd, 2024, engineers sent what they called a poke, a command designed to force the spacecraft to dump a readout of its own memory so they could finally see what was happening inside. What they found was a single chip inside the flight data subsystem that had physically failed. A stuck bit had corrupted about 3% of the spacecraft's memory, roughly 256 words, and buried inside that damaged section was a piece of the very code responsible for formatting and sending data home. There was no way to replace the chip. There was no single block of free memory large enough to simply move that code somewhere else. So the team did something remarkable. They split the affected code into smaller pieces, tucked those pieces into scattered leftover corners of memory, and then rewrote every cross-reference so all those fragments could still function together as one working program. On a machine engineered in the mid-1970s, across a communication delay of nearly 2 days for every single step. On April 18, 2024, they sent the first repaired fragment. On April 20th, she answered, clearly and correctly. By June, full scientific data was flowing again. 5 months of silence, solved not by luck, but by patience, precision, and people who refused to let her go quiet. This brings us to what is happening right now, in the summer of 2026, and why it matters more than almost anything else in this entire story. For the first time in 50 years, the team decided to stop simply cutting from the list and try something different instead. They call it, internally, the Big Bang. The idea is this: instead of switching off instruments one at a time and losing their science forever, swap out an entire group of power-hungry components all at once for lower consumption equivalents, while still keeping the spacecraft warm enough that its fuel lines never freeze. They tested it first on Voyager 2, the safer option, still slightly closer to home and running on slightly more power. On July 9th, 2026, the team switched off 2 dedicated heaters and an old magnetic tape recorder that had not been used for data storage in years, kept alive only for the waste heat it produced. In their place, they switched on other, more efficient heat-generating components, then updated the onboard software so that if anything ever went wrong, the spacecraft's safe mode would default to this new, leaner configuration. It worked. The team estimates roughly 1 more year of operation for Voyager 2's 3 remaining instruments, with some engineers suggesting the real gain could be closer to 2. Kareem Badaruddin, the mission manager at JPL, called it the most significant thing done to either Voyager spacecraft in decades. Now it is Voyager 1's turn, farther from home, weaker, and the one that matters most to this story. In late July of 2026, the power test on Voyager 1 passed. The full operation is underway right now, as you are watching this. Nobody is calling it a guaranteed win, but for the first time in 50 years, the list that has quietly decided everything just met a team willing to fight it. Someday, sometime in the 2030s, the last instrument on Voyager 1 will reach the minimum power it needs to run, and the transmissions will stop. But here is what that moment will not mean. It will not mean she has stopped. She will keep moving at exactly the same speed, in exactly the same direction, exactly as she does today. The only thing that changes is that no one on Earth will know precisely where she is anymore. She will become the fastest, farthest object human beings have ever built, and she will be untraceable, still out there, still going. The people who built and guided her will not all be there to see it. Ed Stone led Voyager's science team for 50 years, from 1972 until his retirement in 2022. He passed away in June of 2024. The humans who understood this spacecraft better than anyone alive are, one by one, leaving before she does. That is not a tragedy in this story. That is simply the order of things. Machines built with enough care sometimes outlast the hands that built them. And through all of it, bolted to her frame, the golden record keeps riding along, carrying sounds and languages and music from a planet that made her. It has never once needed a drop of electricity. It does not care about power budgets, or failing chips, or roll maneuvers. It simply keeps going, exactly as it has since 1977, and exactly as it will for a very, very long time after the last signal ever comes home. In about 40,000 years, Voyager 1 will pass within roughly 1.7 light-years of a red dwarf called Gliese 445, a star that is racing toward her at 120 kilometers every second. She will have been silent for tens of thousands of years by then. No one will be watching. It will happen anyway, She was built by people who are mostly gone now, in a workshop that no longer exists, with technology almost no one alive could recreate. And she will still be out there, still moving, long after everything we know has faded. Where were you in September 1977? Tell us below.